When Die Hard came out in 1988, it paved the way for a completely different type of action movie. Never before had an audience been slammed with such wall-to-wall action, all the while seeing an everyman having to stop an intricate plot single-handedly and have a very tightly written and compelling plot on top of that. And as with anything else so revolutionary, it was naturally followed up with many not-so-good imitators, including a couple of its own sequels. But that being said, there were a couple of movies that managed to put their own decent spin on the Die Hard formula, and one of the better examples of that would have to be 1994's Speed. Taking the concepts of non-stop action, an everyman cop, and an extremely smart but violent villain and putting it on wheels, this is one action movie that most definitely lives up to its name and genre, paving the way for several imitators of its own. And today, I'd like to go over why Speed may just be one of the best action movies of its kind in the 20th century, and how it marked the beginning of its own subgenre. And obviously there will be spoilers ahead, so if you've never seen Speed but would like to, please don't proceed with this video. You have been warned. Okay, so obviously Speed is not the first action movie ever to center most of its action around vehicles that go very fast. If I even tried to claim such a thing, I think George Miller would like a word with me. But it honestly goes back even further than that, perhaps as far as 1939's Stagecoach. So it was obviously a tried and true idea for an action movie long before the iconic bus pulled into the station. What Speed instead did was perfected that concept. Borrowing heavily from Die Hard, Speed doesn't just put a bunch of people on a bus and say that they can't stop it on the flimsiest pretext. No, instead it goes well out of its way to establish why the bus can't stop and what exactly is at stake here. And to that end, its opening establishes Howard Payne and everything about him. That he's dangerous, that he's smart, that he feels the world owes him something and that he'll do anything to get it, and that he doesn't like to be outplayed. And that last one in particular is important, because it helps quickly set up something of a rivalry between him and Jack when he manages to do just that. So with his plans foiled, Payne gets away, but not before promising that they haven't seen the last of him. So with all of that extra context firmly in place, that's when the film really gets going. Determined to get the money he feels he's owed, Payne places a bomb on a bus that will automatically detonate if it goes below 50 miles an hour. And if there is any interference that he doesn't approve of, he can also blow it up remotely. And because of the prologue, the audience not only knows that he means every word he says and is extremely dangerous, and thus won't have any questions about what his motivation is, but it also effortlessly builds tension, both because they can't stop the bus and because it seems that there truly is no way out of the situation since Payne has seemingly thought of everything. And as a result, a lot of speed-related hijinks and stunts ensue, as that's the only logical outcome when a bus is driving along a highway and can't stop or even slow down. And that's the whole point of the movie right there. The adrenaline rush that comes with watching the characters having to deal with going so fast under the threat of death, as well as the dread and uncertainty regarding whether they'll make it out alive or not. That is what the audience is watching it for. The rest of the plot is mostly just there for setup and to ensure that everything surrounding what goes on with the bus makes complete sense. But it's that very setup that makes the movie as good as it is. Because let's face it, the idea of a bus that can't go below 50 miles an hour or it'll blow up stuck on a highway is a great premise for a high-stakes action movie, but could have easily failed in execution. But by borrowing heavily from the equally well-executed Die Hard, it's able to not only get around that problem, but actually improve on an already great idea at that. It puts in the work to ensure that everything the viewer needs to know is properly explained, while also not coming at the expense of the action, and does just enough to ensure that they'll care about what happens to the characters on the bus and want to see them make it out alive. But then it goes one better by really taking advantage of its movie's title by pushing its premise to the absolute limit. Because speed and adrenaline go hand in hand. Even just watching something go extremely fast can get one feeling pumped, as any fan of race car driving can most definitely attest to. And the movie takes full advantage of that, not just in its premise alone, by having the bus not be able to stop and have to continue going fast, but by constantly depicting their struggle to stay out of danger and the obstacles they face at every turn, though the famous bridge jump has got to be one of the most notable. And the results, both from the speed itself as well as the fear of what will happen to the characters, easily make for an adrenaline rush that very few movies before it had been able to achieve. Though, admittedly, its biggest mistake might have been moving to the train for the end. But even then, having the final fight take place on a fast train in and of itself is fine, especially because it makes for an easy yet no less heart-pounding way to get rid of Howard Payne. It's having to stop the train by going so fast afterwards that could make it feel a little too over the top for some people. Though that obviously doesn't detract from everything else this movie gets right. Absolutely not. It's just that the writers might have pushed the envelope a little too far and didn't quite know when enough was enough. Because even speed itself can lose its appeal if it gets too excessive, and that's what the climax can do for some people. And not to mention, it also feels a little contrived compared to how tightly written the rest of the film is. But at the same time, one can't exactly fault the writers for wanting to go out on a high note either, and it's not like it ruins the movie. But regardless of how one feels about the ending, this movie's ability to combine constant speeding action with a compelling and well-written story was such that pretty much any action movie that involves cars, or really any other speeding vehicle, that came after owes something to it. The latter half of the 1990s and even into the 2000s were just littered with action movies that rely heavily on going fast as a way to get the adrenaline pumping. And considering how well Speed was able to do it, is it really any wonder why? Even such popular movies as the Fast and the Furious series, or maybe even to a lesser extent Mad Max Fury Road, borrowed from this film. Because like I said at the start, it may not have been the first movie to center its action around a fast-moving vehicle, not by a long shot, but it perfected the concept and showed how a movie could have an audience completely hooked with nothing but speed and a little good writing all by itself. Because that's what's important to remember about this movie. It's not just the speed, or even the situations the bus gets into, that makes it so good. It's that it's also perfectly written on top of that. Everything that happens is completely justified by the narrative and answers any and all questions the audience has right out of the gate, thereby allowing them to both sit back and enjoy, as well as get totally pumped by everything they're seeing. And it's striking that important balance that makes it such a good action movie, to the point that very few in the genre have been able to replicate it to such a degree since then. Though there are a notable few that have, and have even surpassed it, obviously. But the point is, though some are quick to just dismiss it as one of countless die-hard ripoffs, in actuality, Speed manages to be great all on its own by simply taking inspiration from the earlier film and using its template to allow its own ideas to reach their full potential, and the results speak for themselves, being not only one of the best action movies ever made, but the one that proved just how exhilarating a movie centered around going extremely fast could really be. Okay, that's everything I had to say on that. So now why don't you give me your thoughts? Do you believe that Speed is easily one of the best and most influential action movies out there due to its unapologetic use of the title action coupled with great writing? Or do you think it's overrated and that I'm giving it too much credit? Please feel free to let me know in the comments. But please keep in mind that you are absolutely under no obligation to agree with me just because you watched this video. You can absolutely hate Speed and think it's the worst action movie ever made if you want to, and nobody can tell you you're wrong for feeling that way. And thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it, and I hope to see you all next time.